This is a Hunter PGV 1-inch valve. You've got your inlet pipe. This is your main line. It's always under pressure. This is coming from your water source. This part coming out is going to your sprinklers. The water that comes through this is only coming through when the valve is on. The valve works with a diaphragm and a spring that's inside. It's normally closed. Once a small amount of water is allowed to pass through it, it will actually open up and then allow full flow water coming out. You can do this by releasing the bleeder valve, just to allow a small amount of water to drip out. Most commonly what's done is to take the solenoid, give it a quarter turn, and the valve will open up. Turn it back, and the valve turns off. And the way these work is the solenoid has a plunger. When the power's on, plunger opens up and allows water to come through that little point inside and opens up the valve. It's very important when you're installing these that the line coming in be extremely clean. You should already have it flushed out and not have any debris inside. Otherwise it can get caught inside the diaphragm and affect the performance of the valve. This runs off a low voltage DC current. So you would pull these off. It doesn't matter which one of these you connect to which one. You usually just want to twist them up a little bit so the wires don't get splayed. And then you would take your irrigation wire. This has got a jacket on the outside of it. You cut it to expose the wires that are inside. Your white wire, always going to be common. That's going to go to every single valve. That one's always common. Then you pick your wire that you want to use. Whichever wire you pick, that's the one that's going to be affecting that zone for that valve. Go and you strip the wire. Now, when you're connecting just two wires together, just twist them together a little bit. And you use these special wire nuts. Now these have a gel or a grease or some other kind of material inside that seals out water. If you use a regular wire nut, it's going to corrode in there. These are buried below ground. They do get water in there, they do get dirt. Eventually it will cause the connection to fail. You have to use something that is sealed for these to work. Just push it over it, twist it. May take a few tries before it finally catches on there. It starts to tighten up. There we go. It's starting to give a little bit of resistance now. There we go. Now it's, oops. You don't want it to pop off like that. You can see the gel coming out as I'm twisting this on there. You have to push it in as you do it. There we go. Now it's tightening up. Okay. Now, if you're only connecting one valve to a common, then you can use the same type of connection on there. If you're going to be putting in two common wires in there, if you've got a jumper that's going over to the next valve, then or if you've got two valves side by side and you're connecting them both to the same wire on there, anytime you're using a multi-wire application, you'll want to go to using a bigger wire nut to accommodate it. You can probably get about 3 wires inside these smaller ones, but anything beyond that you'd want to use a larger wire nut. Now, once you've made your connection on there, you're going to put this inside your valve box. You can take the other wires if they're not being used Just wrap them around. And of course this would be connected. And that went on much better. Okay. And this would be what you would have inside. Okay, once you've got your valve set up, you need to have a valve box around there to protect it. What the valve box does is essentially it just keeps it open underground to where you can get to it. Otherwise you're going to bury it underground, you're never going to know where it is, and you can't do anything to fix it. It keeps the valve box will keep dirt away from it. It doesn't do any kind of water protection, but that really isn't needed anyway. Now most of the time you'll see a valve box like this with the pipes running in one side of it and out the other, and your wire running up inside, and this is the view you'll see, and it's covered by a lid. This is essentially going to be at ground level, so this is going to be resting right at the soil level. You don't want it below the soil line, and you don't want it too much above it either. The only time you might want it a little bit above is if it's in a bed where it's going to be a lot of mulch and stuff. You might have it slightly above ground in those cases. You do want it to be something you can find. Now, this is one of the smallest valve boxes they make. And as you can see, there's not a lot of room. Actually, there is one that's even slightly smaller, but you don't hardly find them anymore. Now, this works. You can do this. However, the problem you get into is when you've got to work on it. You've only got enough room to get one hand inside. Now, you can reach in there. You can take out the solenoid to replace it. You can redo the wiring. You can even take the top of the valve cover off, or the top of the valve lid off if you need to work on it. But you don't have very much room, and you definitely can't get both hands in there to work and see what you're doing. So while this is a little less expensive, it can be more expensive on the other end when we're doing repairs. This is a better choice. Again, we've got an opening on either side for the pipe to come through and for the wiring to come through. And you've got lots of room in there. You can get both hands in to work on it. Most of the time when you're doing repairs on a valve, you're not actually even taking out the entire valve, you're just taking off parts of it. You might have to replace the diaphragm, the solenoid, or the wiring caps. Really, there's nothing else to replace in there unless something is cracked. This gives me multiple places to reach around and grab it. I've got lots of access. It also provides a nice open area. Sometimes you're going to have dirt that gets pushed up inside through hydraulic ground pressure, and eventually between the dirt being pushed up and moles and bugs and earthworms and other stuff, the soil level over the years will rise up and it'll cover this up. It's a lot easier to reach into something like this and move the dirt out of the way so that you can get in there to work cleanly. If you've got one of these small valve boxes and you've got to do the same thing, you've got almost no room to get in there to get the dirt out. It will happen eventually. Now, I haven't cut the sides of this yet. This is one of the bigger valve boxes. This one is used when you've got multiple valves. Again, you bury it at ground level. You would cut out these sides on here. Sometimes you have to cut in a little bit to the inside to make room for your pipe to get it at the right height. Now, obviously I wouldn't put just one valve in here, and most often you don't run them lengthwise in here. A lot of times you'll have your main line pipe coming in one side, and the valves will be actually arranged perpendicular. So you would have multiple valves in here. Now, for the most part, 2 to 3 valves is what you want. If you get anything more than that, you're really going to run out of room. When these get pushed out to the side over here, you have very little room to work to get a screwdriver in there. You want to have as much easy access as possible. So if you had 3 valves side by side with probably about 3 to 4 inches in between them is good. 3 inches minimum, 4 inches is plenty. That gives you enough room to work on them. And you would just cut out the sides in here to make room for your pipe so that it's sitting level. You want things to be easy for down the road.